All right, welcome back. So, of course, excluding our two winners of the last chance qualifiers, which in 1 week's time we will know who those are, we are down to the last three teams that I'm going to be previewing for TI11, the top three teams of the DPC this past year. And today we're going to be previewing the kings of the CIS region for at least this past year, but of course, the TI defending champions, Team Spirit, coming into this year's international, qualifying off of points well and far ahead the cutoff line with 1,810 points. These guys are coming off of another fantastic season and are coming in as one of the favorites to win it all again, which I will say is not really a totally common thing. Although we've had repeat champions in the past, for example, OG, it is pretty rare for teams to win a TI and then follow it up with another fantastic season. Notably, OG, despite the fact that they won 2 TIs and they had a pretty good run last year, their seasons have been pretty mediocre, but they do very, very well at TI. Team Liquid did pretty well at that back when they won at TI7. They were pretty consistent after that point. TI6, we had Wings, who of course disbanded shortly after. So seeing Team Spirit survive through this past year, and not only that, but finish top 3 in the entire DPC, including with the tumultuous ongoing situations with Russia and Ukraine, and of course the COVID situation that has been ongoing. It has been a pretty crazy year, and Team Spirit has been able to keep their head above water and end things off at the top of the DPC when it comes to results, finishing first place in the last major of the year at Arlington. But before we get into that, let's take a look at this roster, which consists of the exact same members as last year, and for many of these players this will be their second ever international. Last year was their first, so for many of the roster and players on this roster here, they right now have a 100% win rate at TI, which is a lot better than most people can really say. Yatoro, of course, coming in playing position 1. How could we ever go without mentioning Yatoro God? Will we see a repeat of the 100% diversity, him playing almost every carry hero on the main stage, or will he have some more pocket pick heroes that he's going to be sticking to throughout this next few weeks? We'll see, but regardless, he of course was the carry player for this championship squad last year at TI10. This will be his second international. Same thing for Toronto Tokyo, who has looked fantastic this past year. Collapse, of course, the big game player back at TI10, probably the MVP of the tournament, specifically in the grand finals and in certain key moments on their run. He was the MVP of the team, although that is not to overshadow the supports of this team, who had a fantastic showing last year and this past season as well. Mira and Miposhka. Miposhka is actually going to be attending his third ever TI, as opposed to everyone else, who this is just their second. And of course, for coach, same as last year, we have Silent, who has been in TI 4 times as a player. This will be his second time, or third time, I believe, attending as a coach. And he won, of course, last year with Team Spirit. So taking a look at the results, again, pretty consistent, some minor setbacks here and there, but overall, a pretty remarkable past season for Team Spirit. They kicked things off by going 7-0 in their first regional tour. They earned themselves 300 DPC points, and in their regional finals, they would win that as well in a grand final where they would sweep Virtus.Pro, and they didn't even clean sweep the whole bracket. They actually got dropped down to the lower bracket and fought their way back in. They earned themselves 250 more DPC points. One of the few teams that won first place in both their regional tour and the regional finals without any deductions. Boom did that as well, but because they had a stand-in and they would eventually make changes, they did have deductions there. I believe it was just Spirit and PSG.LGD that actually got all 550 of those points. And in the second tour, which was of course modified due to the ongoing situations with Russia and Ukraine, it was compressed down to a single bracket. They would finish second place. They lost their first series in that bracket to Bet Boom, but they would follow that up by winning every single series along the way to that qualifications. They unfortunately did not get to play against Virtus.Pro because they were disqualified from that tour. It would have been nice to see. They did meet in the bracket, but that matchup just sadly never happened. But regardless, second place finish, they go 4-1. They earn themselves 240 more DPC points and a ticket to Stockholm, where they did struggle quite a bit. Not in the group stage, however. Their group stage was pretty solid. They go 3-1-2. They earn themselves that spot in the upper bracket of the main event. However, in that main event, in that upper bracket, they would quickly fall to the lower bracket and then eventually get knocked out by South American powerhouse Beast Coast. So heading into Tour 3, what were we expecting from Team Spirit? Well, it's more of the same. Although they dropped down to third place, they were tied for first with two other teams. They did just lose those tiebreaker matchups, those best of ones. So they've dropped down to third place, but they're still qualified for Arlington, and it's a good thing that they are, because they end up being the champions of that tournament with a fantastic rematch of the TI-10 Grand Finals, once again, where Team Spirit came out on top after losing to PSG.LGD in the upper bracket finals before that. They went 3-3-1 in the group stage and 4-1 on the main stage, earning themselves 820 more DPC points, which put them well clear ahead of that cutoff line. If they had actually faltered at any point in this tournament, they would have missed out. If they had lost in the lower bracket in the first round or lost in the group stage in this tournament, they actually would not have qualified based off of points, which is pretty crazy to think about, especially when you take a look at the results that they've had this past year. So taking a look at the results now against other teams attending this year's International, this is going to be, of course, as per usual, including teams that are in the last chance qualifiers. In Tour 1, they took down both Na'Vi and Virtus.Pro, and notably that one loss that they had in that series to Na'Vi was the only loss that they suffered in the entire first tour. And in the regional finals, the only team that they actually met in the regional finals that is going to be attending this year's International, and they might not even be attending, is Virtus.Pro, and that was in the grand finals where they swept them 3-0. Tour 2, they would start things off by losing to BetBoom. As I mentioned, they would drop then down to the lower bracket of that, but they would make their way through it, beating Na'Vi on the way. And again, unfortunately not playing against Virtus.Pro. They would have had Virtus.Pro not been disqualified from the tournament at that point. At the Stockholm Major, again, a pretty solid group stage, taking down teams like Fnatic, Thunder, and Liquid. Liquid, that was the tiebreaker match. They would lose to Gaming Gladiators. They would tie against TSM FDX. And then in those best of one, for the tiebreakers, they would beat Liquid, lose to TSM and Thunder, but they would still get that upper bracket spot. But it didn't really seem to matter, as Tundra would immediately knock them down in the lower bracket, and Beast Coast would eventually fell them out of the tournament. Tour 3, they would take down Na'Vi 2-0. They would lose to Virtus.Pro 2-0. They then would take down BetBoom, and in some tiebreakers, they would lose both of those matchups to VP and Na'Vi, which is why they dropped down to third place. But didn't seem to matter. Arlington, 2-0 win over Tundra and Beast Coast in the group stage, a loss to Evil Geniuses, but then 3 ties in a row against Aster, Entity, and Boom. They eventually take down Na'Vi and Virtus.Pro, and that Virtus.Pro matchup was on the main stage. They then would face Aster in the upper bracket semis. PSG.LGD would take them down in the upper bracket finals, but they would get that rematch against Aster where they would officially knock them out of the tournament. They get their ticket to the grand finals where they would take down PSG.LGD in 4 games. And that was the end of their tour. So they end off strong. Again, I remember watching their interview when that tournament ended, saying that it was a huge confidence boost for them, seeing that they could win, seeing that they could replicate their results from TI-10, and it wasn't just a fluke, which, of course, winning TI-10 is never going to be a fluke, but I can understand why it would be a mental thing that maybe you're not as good as your past results may show. So this, for Team Spirit, has to be a huge confidence boost, which is exactly what you have to be worried about if you're another team facing Team Spirit at this year's International, because now you have a team that's not only coming in as the defendants of the last TI's championship title, but they've also just won the last major of the year and are coming in to this tournament with all the momentum in the world. Taking a look now at their stats across every single match that they played in the entire DPC this year, they played 97 games in total, going 66-31. On Radiant, they posted a 60% win rate on 40 games. On Dire, however, they played a total of 57 games, so quite a bit more there. 42 wins, 15 losses for a 74% win rate on Dire. Quite remarkable there. First pick 31-17, and on last pick 34-14, so pretty high win rates for both of those there. On Radiant first pick, they were 17-7, and on Radiant's last pick, they were actually sub 50%, 7-9 win record. On Dire first pick, they were 14-10, and on Dire last pick, that's where you see this win rate skyrocket, 28-5 for an 85% win rate on Dire last pick. Definitely something to look out for heading into this year's International. And something that's really nice to see is finally seeing some diversity. It's felt like over the past few years, Radiant has been the heavy-handed, advantageous side, and if you didn't take Radiant, you were pretty much griefing yourself. And in the past, before they moved Roshan's Pit, it was Dire side advantage, always Dire side, and so now it feels like there's actually some sort of balance where there are some teams that have ridiculous win rate on Dire, and there are some teams that have ridiculous win rates on Radiant, which is nice to see. Same thing for first and last pick. There doesn't seem to be that very clear discrepancy in which one is better, which is always refreshing to see. For games, game lengths and their win rates there. In games that were less than 40 minutes, they were 40-15 for a 73% win rate. And in games that went past 40 minutes, that win rate does come down a little bit, but it is still quite high, 26-16 there. In game ones, they were 28-18. Game twos, they were 31-10. That win rate is pretty remarkable there. 76% win rate in game twos. They are able to bounce back quite well, or if they're already leading in a series, they are very good at closing it out. And in deciding game threes, they are 6-3 for a 67% win rate. Their average GPM is 23.62, average XPM 28.62, an average KDA of 3.67, and an average match duration of pretty high, 39 minutes and 19 seconds, which again is pretty surprising given that most of their games were less than 40 minutes. Taking a look at some hero stats across these 97 games, they picked a total of 92 different heroes, their most picked being Tiny with 18, Snapfire, Bane, and Rubik with 17, Mars with 16, and Monkey King with 13. Their best heroes being Io, who went 6-0, and that is a Team Spirit Classic. Definitely look out for Io for Team Spirit heading into this year's International. It was a classic for them last year, and I definitely expect teams to be targeting that when they're facing them, specifically in the draft. And then, for more of their best heroes, keep an eye on this because this is a lot of Yatoro heroes. 5-0 record on Terrorblade, Sven, and PA, as well as Spirit Breaker, but mainly those first three. All heroes that we didn't really see a whole lot of this past year. In fact, some of those heroes were quite bad this past year. Yatoro 5-0 on all three of those. Queen of Pain, 10-1. Toronto Tokyo's Queen of Pain has been legendary for a long time now. Well, as long as he's been around. But of course, this past year, he's been especially dominant on his Queen of Pain. Same thing for his Kunkka. He is 9-1 on that. On Snapfire, we're 15-2, and Tiny 15-3 for their most picked hero, posting up a win rate of above 80%. That's pretty impressive. For their worst heroes, however, again, not too many bad win rates to find. Chaos Knight 2-4, Marcy 2-4, which the Marcy one is a little surprising given how strong she was, especially in the late stages of the year, and Zeus 4-6. For their most banned, they banned a total of 98 different heroes. Puck topping that with 32. We then have Beastmaster with 26 and Io with 22. So in general, for their bans, not a whole lot out of the ordinary. But yeah, that kind of does it for Team Spirit and their past year. So where do they go from here? Again, this is a TI defending champion heading into this year's International as the third seed internationally, the first place seed from CIS. They've just won the last major of the year. Do you have these guys as the favorites to win the tournament, or is there someone else you have in mind? I know the popular pick is PSG.LGD. They have been the popular pick for the last, 4 internationals at this point. But again, Team Spirit kind of has that magic, and we've seen it at TI. These guys do technically have a 100% win rate at TI as a stack. Maposhko, of course, had another run back at TI7, I believe, with Empire. But regardless, where do they end up? Where do you guys think that they place? Are they 2-time defending champions, or are they going to bust in the group stage, or somewhere in between? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll be having my previews for OG and finally PSG.LGD going up in just a few hours from now, so be on the lookout for that. And then, of course, our last chance qualifiers are going to be starting, and I'll be doing previews for each of those 2 teams as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Check out the links if you missed any of the other previews, and I will talk to you guys later.